put in from cradle to grave.
Oh, well, it seems like we've got much work to do then, doesn't it, Mum? That's about the size of it.
Yeah.
Conditioning.
Exactly.
Because Aboriginal people, we work a lot on energy. So if there's too much negative energy, it puts things off balance, like even the planet. Because we're starting to go into that hip-flop motion again. We went through that before when it come off its axis and then the sun started rising in the north and setting, it was rising in the north, setting in the south, and then it started to rise in the west and set in the west for the first time after it all settled down again. But on our calendars, I think we're coming up to that time again, and we've had the Indigenous men from Central Desert come down and try and walk some energy into country, but as long as they keep conditioning people with negativity, it's just going to get more and more out of balance.
Well, I mean, what fascinates me is, you know, I've been on my own journey for the last 26 years, and what I've come up with, what I've perceived, what I've understood, is totally in sync with the original cultures all over the world, whether it's Zulus or Native Americans or yourselves. There's this common theme, this common story, and it's the story that those in authority don't want the people to know, because they want to keep them stuck in their five senses so they can't get any further out. The only world that they can perceive is the five senses. And if they control the information in the five senses, then they got them. But I tell you what I've noticed, I've found.
Tissue note.
What I've found is, in the last, particularly the last 5 to 10 years, particularly the last 5 years, compared with when I started out, the number of people who are breaking out of their perception prison and starting to look at the world and themselves and reality in a different way is extraordinary. There is definitely... What was fascinating is reading about the Aboriginal prophecy about the energy wave coming, because I came across this in 1990, and I gave it the name, for what I got, I gave it the name truth vibrations. Because what I understood was that this wave was going to act like a spiritual alarm clock. It was going to wake people up from their coma, and it was going to bring to the surface all that had been hidden. And when I look at, you know, what's going on now, and, you know, it's been my life for 26 years, is bringing to the surface what's been hidden. The amount of information that's now in circulation that wasn't 26 years ago is staggering. And what's fantastic is the number of people, people you would never have believed would even look at it 25 years ago, who are now, I mean, I got stopped outside the hotel this morning by, he was a banker, and he was talking to me about this information about how the world's manipulated and reality and all that stuff. There is, you can see the change happening, you can see the wave happening, and my own feeling is that this wave is going to bring down this edifice of control, and which is based on people being held in this tiny box of perception which they can't break out. And once they do, it's like, instead of seeing dots, they're seeing pictures, they can see how it fits, and the whole thing changes. I think it's a fantastic time. I'm so enthused.
The one thing you have in your favour, it is spot on time. I think lots of people prophesise right from Nostradamus and all those guys.
Yeah.
So when it comes in one big wave. A lot of people see it as physical waves crashing on the shore, but it's a different kind of wave. You know, that's just so that they can recognise what they're trying to tell them, the information that's trying to be filtered through.
I've always seen it as like a wave of consciousness which breaks up the density of the boxes, the perception boxes, and suddenly something else is talking, not just that. You know?
Yeah, we're definitely not alone.
I know. I mean, I smile, you know, because the box is so small the perception box, that mainstream science says that the electromagnetic field is only 0.005% what they say exists in mass matter energy. Visible light, which is the only band we can see, is a fraction of the 0.005%. And within that little band, the Earth, by comparison with the universe, is estimated to be the equivalent of a billionth of a pinhead. And yet, people in that unbelievable limitation of perception laugh at the idea there's other life around apart from humans. I mean, it's like that's the scale of the box that people live in. It's extraordinary, and it's been systematically done. I mean, when kids leave the womb, they're straight into the education system, which is nothing more than a programming system. It's systematically done, but it's fantastic what's happening now, because this is the time. This is the time.
Well, yeah, certainly you got it spot on, eh, Mum? It was 8,000 years since the last great earth shaking.
Yeah, I was listening to Bar, was it?
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff, like you were saying, is stuff that we've learnt from generation to generation, and the elders have always taught us that we're universal people sharing one nest, and we look after the nest, look after each other, life is good. But as you said, perception, even of the box factor, and we always laugh about that because most people have been so society driven that they have to fit that box. But you can be a circle or an octagon or a triangle, you don't have to fit the box. But for us, it's about the perception that we are only just mere custodians, and the shell that we walk in is something that our spirit is encased with, but our spirit is eternal. The shell will die off, but the shell might become a tree, or the shell might become a bird in the next life. So it's in your best interest as a human to take care of all the other life forms around you, because one day you might be one of those life forms.
Well, it could be a totem that is linked to you.
And when the sun sets every night, everything that's past that day has to go through the underground water to be filtered through the fresh water, so that all the life essence of their last life is washed away. So when they reach the place beyond the sunset, they get to spend one night in the stars, and the next morning they're already reborn again. And for us, it's that eternal cycle. So people get too attached to the shell.
Absolutely.
When there's a bigger picture out there, and it's not what you can do in your lifetime for yourself, it's what you can do in your lifetime for the generations to come. And that's why our mob have been never too attached to material things, because those things aren't as important as family or health, And we always laugh with a lot of government people who go on about money and economy. This whole world, didn't matter whether you're black, white or purple, survived without plastic money once, The whole entire world. We had everything we need right here. We just surround ourselves with concrete and plastic. And if anything cataclysmic happens, whether it's natural or man-made, you can't eat concrete and plastic. You can't buy back fresh air once it's poisoned. You can't buy back good earth once it's been poisoned. And you can't buy back fresh water with plastic money once it's been poisoned. So the best gift you can give to future generations is the ones that you receive for free. And unfortunately, because so much of the world is money driven, they've forgotten about the most important things, and it's family, health, and the environment we live in. Us as a very young race of people, even though we call the ancient ones, all humans are extremely young race on the planet. Every other thing's been around a lot longer than us, and we are just put here as custodians to look after all the gifts that we've been given. But man's been too blinded by money and just worried about looking after himself, and it's nice. And that's where that social perception's got to change. But that comes from for us, culturally instilled. For others, they look for it as enlightenment or enrichment, but it should be a basic human nature. Even the birds, as clever as us humans think we are, not to crack in your own nest.
We have the thing, we are the keepers of the spirit trails from this life and into the afterlife. So our dreaming is centred around when people pass over in Australia, it doesn't matter where. It could be Queensland, it could be Fitzroy Crossing, it could be the top end. Once you pass over, your body becomes a non-material substance like smoke or gas or something like that, and it travels in all. So being an energy, very fast on water. So they go into the underground streams and riverways, and they journey all the way here. At the back we have the sacred waterhole called the Icke, and they're to wait there until sunset, and on sunset the spirit guides will lead them on their pathway over the other side. We have cave keepers. That one will meet them at the front of the cave, and they will walk them to the back. In the morning they wake up back in bed again, that's their part done. And others will find them on a Y-shaped pathway, and I will say to them, you meet me halfway and I'll take you across. But because of that negative, that conditioning, they fear to approach the black man. They openly and quickly like that. He's only going to ask you once. And where we go to is the North Island in New Zealand. They're known as the gatekeepers. So from there we turn around and we come back. It doesn't matter what culture you come from. If you were born in Australia, you were born with an ancient Aboriginal being or spirit or soul, whichever you want to call it. We call it the true being that sits here in your body. You must have always had that feeling that you have two people living in your house, and sometimes they don't get on. And what up to?
For us, it's, an eternal thing and a bigger picture thing, not just the here and now. And a lot of mob, we get all sorts of people come to us for spiritual enlightenment and guidance. And we often tell people, you spent a lifetime looking for something that you've already got.
Yeah. You know, I've said this for a long time. Seeking enlightenment is something that you're really never going to find, because you're seeking something you already are.
Let me give you a funny story, brother. We get, like I said, lots of different gurus and shaman and people come to us, and we all laugh because they say, you're the ancient ones, and we come to you, but all them fellas come to us, so we will give it. But my little daughter, after I'd been talking to somebody about the river of life, and sometimes the flow is fast, and sometimes you need to sit on the bank, sometimes you just have to learn to be a stronger swimmer. And after I'd finished talking, she comes up to me, 4-year-old, and says, Mum, you don't have to do that, you know. And I said, what? She goes, you don't have to swim in the river of life. And I said, what? She goes, you can float, you know. So just when you think you're driving the bus, you're actually a passenger, like you're saying. When you think you've learnt it all, there's still much more to learn.
Open one door and another 1,000 begins, eh? Well, we in our dreaming stories came from a galaxy through the Milky Way. There's a pathway through the Milky Way called the Merawera, and very dense. So while you're down here in the southern hemisphere, because it doesn't leave the southern hemisphere, and you will see a black shape like a serpent comes up, goes through Orion, and then down into the Mirrabooka. The Mirrabooka is your spear launcher, because we don't call it a woomera down here. So it's spear launcher and your kangaroo skin booker. And from there we dropped into the South Pole, and we migrated up here as an Eskimo Indian and all the way through the north. The Inuit people from the North Pole have been down here and visited us with the same dreaming story, that they'd left behind a large contingency of their family group on a big island off the South Pole. Lots of people say we broke off from Africa, we broke off from Asia, but no, we came off the South Pole and migrated up this way when the land bridges started to appear, because when it started to ice up at the South Pole, it iced up to almost Perth, you know, the side of Perth just about, eh?
When the great shaking happens, all the volcanoes of the world erupt, and they erupt every 8,000 years. So when they erupt, the cloud colours, and that causes knitting time, which is when the sun can't come through and everything turns to snow and ice.
Yeah.
But all the ancient ones know that.
And with the displacement of water, the land bridges appeared. So they say that the most safest place on earth to be one day will be at the mouth of the Augusta River, because that's between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and the same pattern should occur. But with the man-made interference, a hard time is going to be a little bit harder, maybe a lot harder. But we
only for the ones that don't know how to float.
We came up as 5 original tribes, and we were all seven species of the DNA for the planet. So we are everyone's ancestor. This was the first landmass to rise out of the ocean. It's Gondwana land, and Gondwana land means where all life began. And
the tremodolites
moved
in
out
Preston
from
Beach,
here into 5 different tribal
scientifically
groups.
proven as the first thing to fall out of the ocean, like the oldest thing anywhere in the world. And scientists have been doing tests here in the last few years from all over the world, because now they have DNA. And they said to us once that we were 9,000 years old and come across Polynesian land bridge. And the elders said, no, we've been here since man first woke up from his dreaming and learned how to walk. And then later they discovered something else, 15,000 years old, a few years later, 25, 35, 45, up to 75,000 years, and they're still digging. And they told us that we couldn't exist the same time as the megafauna until they found them in their cooking fires where we'd been eating them. And the elders
also found them in the cooking fires on the South Pole too.
And the elders told them all this stuff, but they said it was mythology. And they told them the whale used to walk on land once. They said no, mythology. And then when they had their modern research, they found out the whale did walk on land. Anything that swims like this walked on land once. It has a pelvis and it breathes air and it feeds its babies milk.
Joints.
And if it's a fish, it's always been a fish. It swims like this.
Well, the thing is about science and the mainstream of everything is that they've got this philosophy that if they can't explain it, it couldn't have happened.
You know, and quite often with new technology and new research, the last fact becomes fiction. And a lot of my elders have died with them telling them that their stories were false and fiction, and then they've later proved it to be true, you know. But the same as you were saying before about people coming to a stage, we felt that, and it's been happening since about 2015, we've been calling it the awakening, because a lot of people forgot how to dream properly. A lot of people, that's the ones that their ignorance blinded them, they still sleep. But when they go through their awakening and can see things clearer, then it'll be an easier journey for everyone. For us, you have to remain the eternal optimist, because if you become a pessimist, you put that negative energy into the world. And we see so many young people coming for spirituality, for cultural connection, for environmental, sustainable ideology, and not necessarily looking for that plastic way of life that they've been so socially programmed to. So the future is brighter still.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic what's going on. And, you know, from my point of view, I see us all as awareness, state of being aware. And in the end, one infinite internal awareness with different points of attention. And the point of attention we give names to, but actually it's one infinite awareness. And when our awareness is experiencing through the body, if we hold, like awakened people do, a connection to our expanded self, we get a vision of the world that is a picture. You see the connections of everything. But what this systematic programming has done is pulled people's attention so far into the 5 senses that all they can see is dots and pixels. They can't see pictures. And it's been brilliantly done, and it's obviously been done by a force that is aware, at least to a point, of how we interact with reality. And they've, in computer language, they've put firewalls in so that people cannot perceive beyond it. But those firewalls, those blocks, they're breaking up, and people are seeing what they couldn't see before. I mean, for me, I had a fantastic experience in Peru, very close to an Inca site, where for 45 minutes I couldn't move. and I had this energy going through the top of my head, and eventually I was shaking like I was plugged into the mains. And for 3 months after that, I didn't know what my name was, basically. I didn't know what planet I was on. And then after 3 months, it was like, and people were saying, "You're you again," but I wasn't. I was me, because I was the person they recognised, but I hadn't for 3 months. But I saw the world in a completely different way. Now I'm seeing pictures, not pixels. And it's almost impossible to imagine when you're in the box, and that's your focus 5 sense reality, just what is awaiting, just a little bit out of expanded awareness, completely new, different reality. And what you call the dreaming is, for me, the movement of our point of awareness, an expansion of our point of awareness into realms beyond the 5 senses.
Totally. We have shared dreams. We can call each other. We can connect with each other.
Even when we're taking somebody across the other side, sometimes you have two, 3 extra people with you.
Yeah.
So we can come together from our houses in the morning.
But what
and
you were
talk about
saying,
what
I was
happened.
laughing because we see it so often, and we say, and it's that social programming thing again, but it takes a while to get used to it. And it's also fear of the unknown. It's a cocoon, and it's warm and safe in that cocoon, and cozy, and I call it ignorance cocoon.
Absolutely right.
If that ignorance cocoon keeps me warm and safe, I don't have to look out and see what's happening in the real world, because I'm safe on my own.
Yeah.
But you know that old saying, if you're not part of the problem, not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. But most people choose to stay in that cocoon. And I always giggle and say, well, if you don't bust out of that cocoon, you'll never be a butterfly, and you might be more fragile. But you can choose to stay as a fat, greedy grub if you want to.
Yeah. It's funny. I use the term almost exactly the same, the bubble. And when I talk about that experience I had in Peru, I say it was like someone came along with a pin and burst the bubble.
I know.
And suddenly your whole reality is transformed.
We call it the fishbowl effect down here.
The fishbowl effect.
And same with that cocoon. Some people peek out and they go, oh no, that's too much. Some people try to get out and they get back in again. But the other one saying you have is puddle dwellers. And people say, what do you mean puddle dwellers? And they say they skim across the surface, they don't look in very deep. It's too scary to look at.
Panoramic scan.
Yeah, and it is really unfortunately that ignorance cocoon for so many people, because we have so many different people with different political backgrounds and history and heritage, and a lot of the time they make big opinions on issues they have very little knowledge on.
We're having a lot of spirit contact lately, and with non-Indigenous people, the amount of people that are experiencing interacting with entities and things like that is just escalated, wanting to clean their houses and everything like that. But a lot of places have been cursed with cutting the head off of the old men. So head case injuries is the main problem. We've had to go and do a lot of healing in places where rock faces have fallen on people and stuff like that. But and even in their houses. But for us, we've got to say you can 2 choices. You can move house, or you can just put up with him, because this is an ancient pathway for this man or this entity, and we're not in a position to take it out.
But ironically enough, we're in 2016, and as a people we weren't even recognised as human beings in 1967. There's been so much oppression and atrocity inflicted on our people. But quite often, like with your situation, the rest of the world doesn't get to know the true history until they come and sit and speak with us.
We even use our own cures for cancers and stuff, mate, but the government won't have anything to do with it because they can't make money out of it.
Exactly.
So it pays them to ignore those sort of things.
Exactly.
When I was
But
angry,
we will feed them anyway. Anyone comes along, we just give it to them.
when I was angry and bitter when I was younger, Mum pointed out to me that it's really hard to change some people's perceptions, and that, how can I put it? ignorance and intolerance blinds people to the benefits the energy can bring. And unfortunately, some people get older and wiser, and others just get older and older. So I have to accept the fact that some people will remain ignorant and some people will get wiser. But for us, it's been a horrific journey, yet no, as a family we still stand tall and strong. But you get a lot of people who, of our mob, who've been generationally missionised 3 generations, you know, and the government say, you fellas have to stand up and function in our world, you know.
Yeah.
And if you've had your children taken from you, it'd be like having your arm chopped off, your leg chopped off, your heart ripped out and your very soul crushed, and then the rest of society say, stand up and walk straight and fit in with the rest of us.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. I mean, the thing is that when you realise the infinite nature of reality, and then you look at governments, you look at science, you look at banking, you look at doctors and mainstream health, and they are perceiving reality on a narrow band of the possible, which is almost infinitesimal, it's almost unspeakably small, and the whole of this world is being run on the basis of that stunning ignorance of reality and ignorance of the nature. And this has been my feeling over the years. Behind these people is a force, and it not necessarily take a form. It could be just a state of imbalanced, distorted awareness, but it takes over these people. These people are its vehicles, and to create this this perception prison that it's put the mass of humanity in, it had to seek to destroy those that knew different.
You just have to read the definition of genocide to see.
So all over the world, the native peoples that carry this knowledge, they were always attacked, and they seek to destroy them. And what's been the foundation of it? Whether it's Africa, whether it's Australia, whether it's North America, or wherever, the British Empire. And the British Empire and the European empires were absolute vehicles for this force to take the world over. And what's fantastic now, especially with this wave, this change happening, is they tried to destroy the native peoples. They tried to destroy the knowledge base that they held, but they haven't done it.
No,
they might have got close to it,
because it's not written,
but they've not done it.
Destroyed.
They've not done it, and they can't do it now, because too many people from their perception prisons are now starting to awaken to what's beyond it. And you know, I'm just so optimistic about where we go from here. Some massive challenges to come, but where we go from here, I think, is it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. One of the best sayings she said to me when I was younger was when, and I was a bit angry and bitter, was when they thought they robbed us of our land, our resources and our children, they robbed themselves of the most precious thing of all. And I said, what was that? And she said, our culture and our spirituality. So that sort of thing empowers me as an Indigenous woman, you know, because that sort of thing I know I already have.
Yeah, money. The more money you have, the more possessions you have, the bigger house you have, the bigger car you have, that's the more successful you are.
We were only talking about
and
it
it's
yesterday.
taking people in exactly the wrong direction from where success lies. How about success being how happy you are?
Exactly. We just had that conversation yesterday. Was,
and even if you get up in the morning feeling grumpy, you know, you put on a smile.
It's the economy that you value, you know, whether it's love, whether it's spirituality, whether it's environment. It doesn't have to be money. Everybody thinks that economy is money, but like I said, the most valuable thing you can give to your children is fresh air, good earth and good water, not plastic Wii games and Barbie dolls and things like that. But people often will kill the thing they love the most with love, you know? And it's that perception thing again where realising, the easiest way to say is live simply so almost simply live, you know? Your comfort comes at the expense of something or somebody else. And I think all the elders around the world say we are human beings, not human doings. Just to be is enough.
Yeah, because our job is to cart this one around during our lifetime. When people pass over, we spend at least 2 weeks. We don't spend 4 days and then throw them in the ground, because you do need to smoke the body and you need to separate
we like elephants.
this one
feel
from the body, you know. Otherwise he will keep coming back to that burial ground and he won't move on. In that song line there, some will go and some will have to stay, and that's all there is to that.
Yeah, there's no
with
one-way
the water,
journey for everyone.
The rainbow serpent, the wargle, is not a mythological creature, it's fresh water.
The real being of fresh water. Without fresh water there is no life.
And he can cut through mountains and creeks and rivers and do all sorts of things that a mythological creature wouldn't have been able to achieve. But yeah, fresh water. And his song line is, "When I die, you'll all die."
In the old dreaming story, it says the greedy little birds, and we didn't realise who the greedy little birds were till they come. And they said, when the little greedy birds come, they will chop me off, and they'll send me to the east. They'll chop me up, and they'll send me to the north. They'll chop me up, and they'll send me to the west, to the south. You fellas in the west have to hold my head, because if I die, we all die. And it's basically saying once fresh water is poisonous, you can't do it.
Over in Melbourne, they have a dreaming on their Federation Square, and it's got written there, they'll come from WA in the end. And that part's already been done. We went over to open the Dreaming Channel because of the congestion, what was going on there, and that's from people not passing over. White man is always going to fear trusting a black man to back. So that cycle there is finished, and what will happen is that the whole DNA will run clean out on the planet, and when you get punishment, they start to take bits and pieces of your life, and so there's nothing left, no DNA, no nothing. But it's a pretty strong law, as well as being a real one. But the modern day problem that we have is giving young Aboriginal men injections in prisons which they have no control over, and it's to stop them from birthing. It's a modern day genocide.
And they're doing it in North America as well, to the Native Americans.
Yeah. So when the boys went in the gym, they realised there was only all Aboriginal boys, and then they said, "What's going on in here?" And they made out it was some flu injection or something like that. And they said, "Well, what about the Asians and the white people? Aren't they going to have it too?" And my brother Vernon, he received that injection in 1987. Years back they made a statement that the Indigenous race will not be here by the end of the 21st century. So you make a statement like that, you already have a plan.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I've been uncovering for the last 25 years, and it's all part of a gigantic global conspiracy. And of course, your DNA will interact with reality in a different way, because it's a different frequency. And so they don't want you around. They don't want your DNA around. They only want the DNA frequency that will interact with the perception prism. And the thing that they want to do now, and they're manipulating people into it with all this technology and smartphones and what have you, is they want to get technology inside their bodies and attach them to a technological mind rather than a conscious mind. And
men marry men.
Yeah, they call it transhumanism, and they're saying, look, attach yourself to technology and you'll become superhuman. No, you'll become subhuman. But that's not.
And control.
But you know, a lot of people are buying it. So one of the things I'm going to be stressing as I'm going around Australia, that this is where you're being taken. But you know, one of the big things for me of breaking out the perception prison is for people to realise that everything is conscious. That's the big thing.
And you do have a decision.
That's why
at the end of the day, you have to make your decision.
That's why we use the smoke, because the whole universe works on
what they can see, you know.
Electromagnetics, and there's different pools in energy. The human body works on electromagnetic
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
And we tend to surround ourselves with so much artificial energy that the body becomes imbalanced.
Yep.
And then the mind becomes imbalanced and the spirit becomes imbalanced. And we have so many people who come to us from all over the world for healing of really bad sickness when the doctors have sent them along, they can't do no more. And we've healed all the fellas that have come to us with the bad sickness. And the doctor's like, how can you do that? And we explain to them that if this is sore and you just put a Band-Aid on it, you're going to need a really big box of Band-Aids. Because if this is not well and this is not well, then that's going to be wounded all the time. But if this is well and this is well, that will heal itself, you know. But as humans, as I said, we surround ourselves in buildings, inside, electricity. Traditionally in nature, we all slept outside. We got the moonlight, we got the energy of the moon, we got the energy from the sun. But now we live in these little boxes. What's that social conditioning?
Can't see what's going on at night time.
Can't feel, can't see, can't touch. And we have almost tried to make ourselves plastic. You know, we are an animal too.
Well, we've taken ourselves away from the nature and put ourselves in a little glory box up here somewhere. But what's happened over the last 100 years or more, maybe a little bit more, is that because of the lack of water, these big gum trees are all surface feeding. So they're just sending out little roots on the surface. So without the big tap roots that could be 3 times as long as the tree itself, to anchor it in the ground, we're losing habitat and we're losing food source for native birds and possums and cockatoos and things like that.
We have lots to share, but most people have not been willing to listen or not been allowed to listen because of stupid government acts and policies of the past.
Exactly.
And ironically enough, at the same time as the government was trying to segregate us, they were also trying to assimilate us. So everyone was like, what do they want? You know, really. But the biggest thing, like I said before, the statement of realising that universal nest factor. And my grandfather told me that be patient because they're a young race. They still have a lot to learn. And we've had the chance to learn a lot of the things that they still need to learn. Because sometimes I would think, wow, some people so stupidly ignorant.
It's extraordinary.
And
some things the old
he would guide
Aboriginal
me
men
with
are
wisdom.
capable
You
of.
know?
It's fantastic, mate. These old Aboriginal men are still shape-shifting and time-travelling. It will take another 1,000,000 years before a non-Indigenous person would even be able to consider trying to learn this.
Well, funny enough, I've had a lot of ridicule around the world for actually talking about the fact that shape-shifting is possible.
Of course it happens
Because
all the time. I've seen it here in the last couple of months.
what have you experienced with it?
Oh,
With
well,
dogs.
man,
Dogs.
If you want to know about that stuff, you
It's like a sci-fi movie. Come to the right camp.
Yeah.
Well, what happens because of that energy substance, but they can use it while they're manned today as well. So
there's that meat, fat and bones factor.
you'll see a dog
And the totem.
walking across the property and he'll go behind the tree. It doesn't come out the other side. And my granddaughter said to me that, oh, now he went behind the tree and just disappeared. But what happens is they will enter the tree, they can go to the surface and disperse and travel that way, or they can go to the ground and disperse on the ground.
And they reckon that part of the brain that people have forgotten to use, only some people have forgotten to
And
use.
this is where it's
This is the higher enlightenment factor of being able to leave the shell, being able to astro travel, being able to use different energies in the trees or the birds, different animals. One of our old fellas, and you can get the story of him, and his name was Pemulwai, and he had a scar across his eye. And they shot him so many times that even the white people started to freak out, like, man, we can't kill this guy. And they kept taking him out to the island and leaving him on the island, but they go to the cell and he'd be gone. And one time they shot him 7 times and had him chained to the neck and the legs in the cell. And the guards walked out just to get a drink or something, and they walked back in, like only momentarily. And at the bird looking at them was a crow with a scar across his eye, and he went, wah, and flew off. And it's all written in their stories, in the English stories.
They found it hard to kill the doctorman or the lawman because he doesn't carry his here. He can carry it anywhere in his body. Human being was able to at one time replace digits, organs, arteries,
That's why we laughed when they first said with the transplants that people were experiencing allergies or feelings from the person whose body they got it from.
Right.
It's because this body works, the humans still looking on the surface, this body's got a lot of different internal workings that are much deeper, and that's that electromagnetics, the sensitivity, everything works in together, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is absolutely so in keeping with what I write about, and you have this. People's attention is so pulled into the five senses. All they can perceive is what they think is physical, but isn't. And therefore, when you're talking about any physicality that's malleable, that's movable, that's shiftable, their mind cannot process that information, because everything is telling them only the physical exists, and physical equals limitation. It means you can't do this and you can't do that. Once you realize that actually we are awareness, we are energy, which can manifest in multiple ways, and all these apparent myths and legends that are just crazy, they make total sense. And for you, you know, you're talking about the electromagnetic field, and what's interesting is you've got science who have been through the program, scientists who've been through the program, and they themselves are so welded to the five senses that the idea that there are energetic levels of the body for which the apparent physical is only a projection, they can't see it. So when you have alternative ways of healing, which are about healing the electromagnetic field, so that the body becomes healed, which is like an expression of it, because they can't understand these energetic levels of the body, they cannot understand how these alternative methods of healing work. And so they say, it can't be done, it must be nonsense.
To the point now we've got doctors saying, can you show us what you're doing? We tell them, you don't need to know what we do. You just send the people to us and we'll help them. For us, healing is something that we do as like a gift that there are people around the world who are dying because they can't afford to be sick, and doctors are prepared to let them die because they can't afford to be sick. But because of that dehumanisation or denaturalisation with most people, if everyone knew what was in their own backyard, they would know how to heal themselves. Because most medicines are plant derivative anyway, it's just they make synthetic versions of natural products. But the economy of the governments don't want that sort of thing, big pharmaceutical companies, because if you can fix yourself, what do you need them for?
Exactly.
We make these little skinning tools here, they're called dart knives, and they're made from the balva resin, the kangaroo gum, but it eats the best and finest grass and charcoal from the fire. It's the first registered tool ever made by man, and it's carbon fibre.
We crush up the charcoal for the carbon, kangaroo poo for fibre, resin-based primitive carbon fibre. But most ancient cultures have technology that's been advanced into modern way of life. It's just sometimes remorse. Yeah. And we always laugh when people say Leonardo da Vinci was the founder of aerodynamics, and we say, well, I'm pretty sure we had that boomerang there for a few thousand years before he was born. But when it comes to spiritual stuff, bro, for us, that's that higher enlightenment. And we make ceremony grounds that open up the pathway of the Mirawira Walgabi, which is
as soon as you put it down on the ground, the mandala, and you stand back, it rises the same like a dampener like that.
And it's like a doorway, and a lot of people wonder why we clean them all up and sweep them over when we finish. And we say, well, you've got to know what you're letting through that doorway. We get a lot of naive people who come and want to open up doorways that they're not prepared to open or not ready to open. And that's why we have ceremonies from when we're really young. And you go through ceremony from when you're 6, right up until when you're 15, 13 to 15, when you're a young man and woman. And that's to get you mentally and spiritually and physically prepared for the future. Because, you know, knowledge is dangerous to some people if they're not ready for it.
Yeah. And a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
In the wrong hands, it can be really not good. And that's why we're careful on which of the young fellas get chosen for what. Because if they're not strong enough here or here, they might not be able to carry it, you know. And even with the people that we share the knowledge, we know you guys are more open, so we're sharing more openly. But some people, you just got to give them little bits, because if you overload them, it just...
Yeah, I know what you mean. So people would come here and they'd see the smoke and they'd say, well, it's just smoke. But presumably it's on another level. It's a particular frequency. It has a particular effect on that electromagnetic field.
Totally. You know, even scientifically, the smoke can annul electricity.
What the whales and the crocodiles do.
Like with the didgeridoo, you know, they use gonging.
I love the didgeridoo.
They use chimes and they use vibration all around the world. Scientifically, human body is made up of a large percentage of water, and if we've got our imbalance of electromagnetics, we need to get that pitch of vibration to pull it back in together. But you need to dull the electromagnetics to be able to get that pitch back in, otherwise you're just blowing over the surface. You know?
Yeah, I see that. It's like that, and then you have to calm it to influence it.
And then rebalance it and get the vibration right. Because you know yourself, sometimes you can walk and your body feels calm, and then there's other places your body's buzzing. And even with human beings that you surround yourself with, some of us like energy vampires, you can walk out of a room and feel like...
Yeah, been there. Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. And they don't know they're doing it.
No. And some people with good intention,
and
some
with chopping
with
down
not.
all the trees and all of this stuff here, and so just, I'm not being rude, but what is it about you people that just want you to want to destroy everything?
For the trees, for us, and let's try to give you the higher connection of spirituality, we are matriarchal down here in yoga. And we always follow the wisdom of the elder women.
That's why the women are here and the men
We'll
are
make
cooking.
social decision making together as men and women, but if we make the wrong decision, the elder women will guide us with their wisdom and their big sticks. And quite often, always, they guide us with care and compassion for community and family first, and never get clouded with ego and power. So we always bow our head and follow the wisdom of the elder women. But being saltwater people, if you look to the ocean, the grandmother dolphin leads the pod, the grandmother whale leads the pod, and they're the matriarchal leaders. And being saltwater people, we believe all life crawled from out of the ocean once, and that's why when we pass over, our spirit crawls back in there again. And that's why that whale, when it crawls onto the land, when it's time for his passing, he remembers how his ancestors used to walk, and he tries to walk back onto the place of his ancestors, and that's why he beaches himself.
There's also with the passing over view, if you don't pass over and you get to stay, it's not like you get to come back in this form. You will be in a form that can't be seen, can't be heard, and can't interact. Just more or less scream without a voice for eternity inside a rock.
There's some old fellas that have trapped bad spirits in rocks, trapped them in trees, and when archaeologists or anthropologists ask us stupid things like, can we just blow a hole in the limestone so we can go down to the next layer? It's like, man, just leave the limestone there, okay? You don't know what's underneath.
But it's really, it's a bit of a struggle getting to the importance of it. Like, don't upset it.
Yeah, it's about balance.
Yeah.
And you can't have all good and you can't have all bad. Just like that. Balance. Yeah. Because everybody goes, well, why don't you just get rid of all the bad things? And you think, well, how are you going to know you're good if you're never bad?
Yeah. But it's this focus on the five senses obviously pulls you out of that level where everything connects to everything else.
Well, I can walk through here in the middle of the night and not feel like I walk into a tree, because every single one of these trees is a grandmother spirit passed over, because only the grandmothers will give up their legs so they can always provide shelter, protection and watch over their family, you know. And that's why we get really upset when people cut down the trees, because that's our grandmothers and our matriarchs, but also common sense tells you that's our oxygen.
And keeping the water table like,
high
it's
that whole balance. And you know, people go on about evolution, and I often giggle because we know that insects have been around for millions of years before human beings, so they must be awfully evolved by now, eh?
Oh, they must be smart little critters, I tell you.
Yeah, this disconnection is the big problem, because once you get into the five senses, all you can see is the need to do. Once you expand your awareness into a point where everything's connected, you get to a point where you can just be. You know, and that's the worst nightmare of the control system, is people going there. You know.
We get both spectrums with people who like to think they know and people
Vern's
who...
the one over there just walking. He's the one that had that injection in 1987. The first time we become aware of what was happening. And we call it a modern day genocide.
But it's actually documented the government sterilised our men and women, and even when they had the Miralinga bomb go through, we weren't still classified as human beings back then. They knew people were in the desert there, but they wanted to see what effects would happen on human beings, you know. And a lot of that, we were still classified as fauna. But a lot of the people who were in the bombing site out there, when the big bomb went off, they never knew. So there was mothers holding their babies like this, mummified, just cooked, mummified. And all the little kids, because they didn't know, they all looked at the bomb when it went off. So they all in their 50s and 60s now with white eyes, because they got no eyes left, their eyes were burnt.
Good God.
And afterwards the government tried to clean up the problem.
They just wanted to see what the effects would be on
humans. Poisoned oranges and stuff all around the place so they could clean up the problem before anyone got to see too much. But because these people survived that, they told their story, you know.
And what's happening with the development area, this used to be the most populated area in Western Australia because of all the vegetation, food and water, of course. And they came in at Esperance, the redcoats, and they genocided the war down, even up to a point where they had to chase them up around through Fremantle so they could catch them over the back between Moora. And they said things like the other Aboriginal people from that area don't want them there because they're stragglers, but they didn't realise they were being chased away because of the massacres that were going on here. I know they have written evidence because they archive everything. This is just their thing, you know, and they would know where these sites are. But in 200 years, they have not even once offered to any assistance to find them or go through their archives to see where they're buried. So out of thousands and thousands of people, we've only done 13 reburials. I've got 3 women in there and a little boy with me now. But when my mum and I went to visit this lady that was living in a 2-storey house up in Port Girograph, she said that she was having entities coming through her house, and so this really big one would go through the back door and out through the front door, and you'd keep going. So while we were standing in the backyard, I noticed the bone fragments, and I said to her, "You've got bone fragments in your backyard, that's probably what all the disturbance is." And she said, "Yeah, I went to the Shire and I told them about that." And she said if I kept my mouth shut, they would know nothing about it.
But the irony of it is...
They dug up an ancient burial ground, put them bodies back through crushers and just scattered them. I could be walking along the street in Bustleton in my hometown, and on the side of the road are bone fragments of my ancestors laying.
From telephone ditch witches and things, development. The government says to us all the time, "Tell us where your burial sites are." And I laugh and say, "Mate, our culture's like an onion. I can tell you my layer of knowledge, then there's layers and layers and layers that go back over 75,000 years. And I say, how many burial grounds you non-Indigenous mob got since you got to Australia in 200 years? And they go, "Oh, heaps." And I said, how many do you think we might have after 75,000 years? Every grain of sand you walk on is probably sacred, you know? So it's, what Mum was saying is there was massacres everywhere, and these massacres, they never give us proper burials. They pushed us in like cattle in one big burial.
Well,
they won't tell us where all these
they built these, this comes from Northern Ireland, or Isle of Man. So this is the ground here. They would dig down like this here. These are what you call portable crematoriums. So that when they shot and killed the Aboriginal people, but the dreaming I had, one came up and tried to grab a bloke by the leg. He was standing up here making sure they didn't come out. They would throw them in there, have a flue thing that come here to keep it burning. And it's always on top of a hill. So when you're driving along and you see a hill, you'll see a pile of rocks up on top of the hill, and you think, why did that crazy person drag all the rocks to the top of the hill when they could have just rolled them down?
They were lime kilns, it was a common thing.
They were making lime kilns in virgin countries, and that was the excuse for what this was. Over here in WA, they shot the men
and they wrote back to England saying that no women and children were shot, and they weren't. They were killed with sabres and stirrups from the horses. But over in Melbourne, they put them all through melting pots.
God.
Yeah, a lot of our history is not known by the rest of the world. And ironically enough, we've been through some of the most horrendous oppression. But we always say to the government that when they say Australia is advanced, Australia fair, we say Australia is not so advanced or fair for some.
I think the thing is that you see all the time how ignorance looks down upon enlightenment because it's ignorant and doesn't recognize enlightenment. So, you know, the European mind coming into the land of indigenous people, because the indigenous people live in a totally different way, because they're interacting with reality and perceiving reality in a totally different way. To the ignorant, that's primitive. When actually that's the primitive. It's an extraordinary inversion that you see, and that's been behind it all. This arrogant idea that you know best when you're clueless. The arrogance of ignorance, I call it. You know.
And ironically enough, this planet will quite happily survive without human beings, but it can never survive without ants and bees and all the things that people tread on or squash or take for granted, you know. And it's that fresh air factor. But we always giggle and say a lot of people want to blame the governments of the world, when realistically it's got to come back to every single individual parent to make sure they instill basic morals and ideology into their children.
Yeah, that's another thing that I find. The people that are really, really materialistic, are really pulled into the five senses, they disconnect from that level of themselves, which we call empathy. We call empathy, we call compassion, all those things, because you almost you become material like yourself, and no one who is in any state of empathy or compassion could ever do what has been done. It's impossible.
I had an older man come to me, and he'd been taught to be plastic all his life. So when his wife passed away, he couldn't cry because he thought he'd shame himself. And his daughters brought him down here to talk with me, and they said, we don't know, we can't fix Dad, we don't know what's going on, and he's holding it, you know. And I explained to him that your tears can drown you in your own sorrow, you know, if you don't let them out, because we are real, we are animal, we are human, we're not plastic. And we've got to let those emotions show, and everybody's been taught not to show emotions, not to show feeling, not to show senses, but that's what makes you real.
Well, I'm back here now in Perth after that lovely, amazing day with the Aboriginal people just down the coast, a few hours drive away. And wherever I go in the world and meet the native people, if you like, that have a long history of presence on that land, wherever it is, a long oral history, oral tradition, and can chart back their legends and stories way back into antiquity, tens and tens and tens of thousands of years, in the case of the Aboriginal people of Australia. Whenever I meet them and talk to them, I hear the same themes, because there was an ancient knowledge, is still, that has spanned the millennia, that has been systematically suppressed by that which took the world over, and suppressed in the most grotesque ways. There are so many continuing themes that you come across as you go around the world and meet native people, original people, if you like. And one is that what they say about the world so much of what they say about the history of the world and what they say about the nature of reality itself are so so much the same, so confirming of each other. And these legends, stories, accounts go back so far that they cannot be explained in their common themes and similarities by contact, because at least for an extraordinary amount of time, that contact has not happened in any way that is enough to explain the similarities. Yes, there's been a lot more contact than official history records or claims. Like it's clear when you look at the evidence that the Egyptians came to ancient Australia and got a lot of their knowledge from here. Same with other parts of the world, but the common themes are much more an evidence of a once global culture, a global sense of reality. But when the modern mind took over, the so-called cutting edge of evolution took over out of Europe, then earlier out of the Middle East and Central Asia. This ancient knowledge was viciously and mercilessly suppressed. We have a situation in Australia where when the Europeans arrived, they wouldn't even designate the Aboriginal people as human beings. They were some form of animal, and thus could be treated as people treat animals. And the way they were treated and violently removed from their land of all those tens of thousands of years is really a grotesque story, which was repeated all over the world, of course, in North America when the Europeans moved in with this modern mind, shall I call it, which is basically the imprisonment of perception in the tiny range, the myopic range we call thought. Basically, the realm of the five senses, the realm of the brain. Whereas native peoples, they come from a different perspective of interacting with reality and decoding reality. And that is a much more expanded state of awareness, which takes their point of attention deeper into other realms of reality that we can't see. And from that, gather a much more expanded sense of reality and sense of the world. So much so that when I talk to native peoples like the Aboriginal people today, they are far ahead in understanding reality and the way we interact with it than mainstream science, which claims to be the cutting edge of human knowledge. What a joke. And I've gathered my information over the last 25, 26 years from endless sources and out there. And most of them, if you like, Western sources of information. Western sources of information that have had the intelligence to open their minds to a much greater understanding of reality and possibility than mainstream Western science, medicine, etc. And yet, when I talk with native peoples like today, and they talk to me about their beliefs and their reading and explanation of reality, it's in a different way of explaining it, obviously, but it's just like having my own books read back to me. There is a universal knowledge that is available to anyone beyond the myopic box enclosed mind of the conscious mind of the realm of thought. And that is what the system has been seeking to keep from us. Because when you enter those realms of understanding, you are no longer Fred Jones or Ethel Smith. You're no longer in a sense of limitation, in a sense of I can't, in a sense of this world is all there is. Because you know those things are all extraordinary levels of nonsense. And what we need is a coming together of those which you might call in the West. And what I mean by that is in the Western mode of thought perception. And coming together with a renewed and sometimes, in fact, more than sometimes, for the first time, with respect for the knowledge and the information provided by ancient peoples that have survived to present day. Because today, here I am, a so-called Western man born in the English Midlands, and the language that we were communicating today with people that have a history going back tens of thousands of years in this part of Australia, the language and the communication was the same. There was very, very little difference. And in fundamentals, there was no difference in the way they perceive reality and the way that I perceive reality. So it's not a case of different peoples are different because they are intrinsically different. It's because people have different sources of information to give them a fix on reality and life. And different people allow in different levels of information to help them come to their conclusions about reality and life. So native peoples are brought up in a certain way to open their minds to these greater, expanded senses of the possible, because that's the culture. The Western mind is brought up in a strictly controlled information tunnel called the education system and the mainstream media and all the institutions that come out of mainstream thinking, what I call the mainstream everything, to ensure that the vast majority of them see reality in a completely different way. Religion too is, Western religion is part of that process of the perception download, the perception deception. And so the programmed mind of the Western mind then goes walkabout all over the world with a certain sense of perception, and thus seeks to destroy and marginalize peoples that, because of its Western program mind, it believes to be primitive it believes to be savages, almost, and in the past, not even almost, when actually they are aware in terms of reality and the infinite levels of reality, they are aware of far more than the Western mind can ever be until it ceases to be the Western mind and starts to be the free thinking, the free knowing, the free flowing mind that anyone can become. It's just a choice. And there's no doubt, although of course there are still blatant extreme exceptions, that more and more people are beginning to see the ancient wisdom carried on and kept alive through these ancient peoples. They are starting to see it in another light and realize that the Western mind is, in effect, in terms of an expanded awareness of reality, it's a village idiot compared with those who are able to see beyond the five senses and to experience beyond the five senses. Because when the Aboriginal people of Australia, for instance, talk about the dreaming or the dream time, it is simply expanding their point of attention into other realms of reality that are denied the conscious mind and certainly denied the Western conscious mind. And beyond that tiny band of frequency of the Western conscious mind lies infinity to be explored, to be understood. And the native peoples of the world who have been so abused, so ridiculed, so marginalized, I mean, I can relate to all that with my life as well, in terms of ridicule for being different. Those people who've been through all that, they've survived, and now they need to be listened to, taken seriously, and allowed to add a whole new level of understanding to what we call Western society.